This is Morning Express, and it's time for us to look into the newsroom. It is just about 10 minutes after 7 right here in Nairobi, Kenya, the capital city of Kenya, which is also known as a place of cool waters. It's time for the newsroom, and let me introduce our panel this morning. And starting from my extreme left, you have Patrick Gadala, who's a communications consultant, also a cartoonist, and great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Nancy Booker, who is Dr. Nancy Booker. Dr. Booker, let me say, I correct myself. Dr. Booker, who is chair for media department at Multimedia University. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, Clay Muganda, who's an editor with us here in the Standard newspaper. Karibu sana.
Thanks.
And let me start with Gadara, Patrick, and your take on Mashujaa Day. Let's start maybe with the coverage. It's always, we almost have a template that we use for most of our official celebrations. Is there something we can do different about our coverage on this kind of occasion?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that we can do different. I mean, and you're right that it is very, it's not a template, very predictable. You would get some a few sort of rehashed stories from way back, what happened and stuff. But I find that it's not, it's just a repetition. So like the Nation are playing the Moi Muigai documentary, which I think they had played last year, as well. I think it was launched last year in 2013. You know, so there's quite a lot more I think that could be done. If you looked at the TGS report, for example, there's very many stories that lie over there untold. You know, we've got 40,000 witness interviews that the TGRC did. That could be a way of trying to understand our history from the viewpoint not of the people who are in power, but of the common regular monarch who experienced it. You know, so I think there's a lot more could be done if people actually were willing to invest in finding out and telling those sorts of stories instead of simply repeating what we've seen in the past.
Okay. Dr. Booker?
Yes, I agree with Gadara that I think what we see is a template. You can almost predict what kind of stories the media is going to give you. So much so that I think you're better off doing other things than waiting for the speech. And waiting for the speech, you know, which you can also be able to get online, you know, after a while. And I think what is missing in most of the coverage is the going back into history to check on some of the promises that are usually made, or you know, challenging some of the content that is in the speech. You know, when I listened to the president yesterday, I almost asked myself, am I living in the same country? You know, it sounded too good to be true. And yes, I appreciate the fact that there have been certain gains, but there are also other issues that we wanted to hear him speak about. And I think what is going to happen next year is, you know, if we had a situation where media, you know, goes back and says, this is what we were told in 2015. This has been the, you know, the situation 1 year later. I think going back into history to try and interrogate some of the issues that come out, you know, in the speeches, in some of the statements that are made would be important. But then, as Gadara says, that calls for a lot of investment in media houses, in the kind of journalists that we have, who can be able to think outside of that template, that has been there for a while. And then I think also the focus. You know, I looked at one of the papers and they have pictures of the powerful women in Kenya and how they showed up at the celebrations. And I asked myself, what's the importance of this? I think it's trivializing, you know, that
thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and it's also painting a picture of the glamour that was there, and you know, just giving us an idea of how it felt.
I think when you look at women in power, you need to look at more than just, you know, the glamour around it, and that then, you know, simplifies the work of women in society. I think there is much more to just showcasing how they appeared at the celebrations, and that is something that we always see, You know, there is much more that we can look at and focus on. How come we don't see men and how they showed up?
And how they walk.
And how they walk.
Well, women, I guess, are a symbol of glamour and...
Yes, but there is much more to that, because then that reduces us to just, you know...
what you look like.
What we look like. And there is, you know, there are brains behind those women. So I think for me, that didn't sit very well with me.
Okay. Clay, you're taking terms of coverage. Is there any way we can get out of this template, and especially in regards to coverage on the day? We it's almost predictable. We're going to have a reporter there telling us the place is filling up. Yes, the choirs are getting ready. Is there a way we can change that script?
Oh, we forgot to add the following day. There's pomp and splendor. We have to use those.
Those two words have to be there.
Words that we consistently use.
It's boring. It's boring because of also the way the thing is organized. Because by now I would have expected that this National Day, it's the same thing. I mean, the state successive governments have been doing it. It's either Uhuru Park or Nyayo. And I thought that probably they needed a change, maybe like, okay, fine, let's celebrate this thing. It's a Kenyan National Day. Let's try and celebrate it this time in Mandera. Let the president go and celebrate the whole thing in Mandera. Let's try another time. Let's do this in Turkana. You know, I mean, make it a little bit interesting. As for the media, I don't know what to say because. It's the same thing. We do the same thing. I mean, like, a few stories change. Like yesterday I saw this Mashuja Day since it started. Yesterday I think we find people, we picked on some sportsmen, we interviewed them, we picked on the guy who designed the AU logo, we interviewed. Yeah, so it's more or less like the same thing, just what do they say, different monkeys, same forest, or different forest, same monkeys?
Yeah, well, same thing.
But as those the Shujas we're celebrating, isn't that, I mean, how else would we interview, or who else would we interview other than those who actually...
I mean, it's all about style. From the way these guys are speaking, it's all about style. I mean, I'm not castigating the media, I'm not passing judgment per se, but from the way Gadara and Dr. Buka are saying, it's like what we do is, it's boring, you know. So yes, we have to do this. I mean, probably the same people we interviewed last year, I suspect there's some people we interviewed last year that we're going to interview now. There's so many of these heroes. I think what we need to do is probably the angling of our stories is what we need to change, and stop this thing like, okay, fine, on 20th of October we will go and look for this Shuja. We should probably find a way of, maybe if it's I mean, having these things maybe periodically, or maybe weekly, or maybe monthly, you know, throughout the year, not just wait for that time where you know that, okay, fine, tomorrow between from 15th to 20th, the media will be looking for the so-called Shujas and interviewing them. I think that's probably what we need to change.
Okay.
But there's very little, like, as long as this thing is done the same way, that, okay, fine, you go to Uhuru Park, there's a guard of honor, then after that there is a State House party.
There's some entertainment.
There's some entertainment and the State House party and all that, some entertainment with bad whatever sound quality. Then after that you go, so it's the same thing.
Is this the day when they give out the awards?
It's not just the media alone.
But my point, I think
it speaks volumes also about the way we organize our events.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I also think that, I mean, the speeches that are given, especially the presidential speeches, are fairly anticipated and waited for thing. It's a big policy statement, you know, and I find very little in terms of trying to anticipate it, you know, and explaining a context around it.
But you see that when you cannot blame the media for it. I think the only thing probably the media can do is maybe interrogate, like, okay, fine, last year this is what you said, between that time and now what has changed, you know?
There's also setting the stage about the things that he should speak about, you know, what are the things that we should expect. And secondly, I think a lot more probably could be done, of course in conjunction, I suppose, with State House and stuff, try and get that speech before, you know, and get hints. What is it going to cover? And then we can start interrogating it from before. I mean, they do this in other countries, you know. I think, I mean, if you look at the run-up to it, I mean, he had an interview on CNN where he said some fairly atrocious things, you know, both about homosexuals, you know, and another thing that really stood out to me was he gave out a figure saying that 98% of all IDPs had been resettled in their original homes, which is the first time I'm hearing this figure, you know. and you're wondering, where is it from? Where does it come from? Who are we resettling if 98% are already back in their homes? You know, and again, we need to interrogate some of these things in the run-up to it, so that you lay a context for that speech. You know, so when he gives it out, there's an expectation, and he knows he's got to live up.
You can almost measure and say, did he miss it or did he?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, I think anticipating what what the speech is likely to point towards helps in identifying the kind of experts that then media houses will have in the studio on that particular day to analyze the speech. I think oftentimes what we see, are what Clay doesn't like, the political analysts who come out.
We didn't have any yesterday,
no, we didn't see that. Who come up and analyze it.
We're facing them out.
Yeah, from that box. So I think getting experts in the various areas. When he talks about security, can we have security experts? When he talks about education, can we have experts in education? Interrogating what he has said, and that can only happen when you have anticipated what is likely to be on the speech. Which media houses should be able to?
No, I think that would be speculation, because you cannot, with the Kenyan political system, you cannot anticipate, or you cannot. I mean, it's the only people who speculate and start talking about things that have not happened are political analysts. But I mean, as professionals, it's very, very difficult, because we are dealing with a very unpredictable political class. You see, who actually they shoot from the lips, not from the hip. They can't say anything at any time. So you can. It's very difficult to plan. It's very difficult to plan your coverage. It's very difficult to plan your coverage based on what these people are going to say.
I think what is missing. I think what for me, because I don't think what he spoke about was something that there was no wow factor. Like I think for me what shocked me were the statistics. But in terms of the areas that he tackled, I knew he was going to do that. Those are things that he was going to speak about. The difference for me was the kind of statistics and the figures that were then attributed to this, which, even if as a media house you're not able to anticipate the figures, you can be able to anticipate some of the areas that he's likely to talk about.
And it's not just what he's likely to talk about, I think it's what he should talk about. In a very real sense. I mean, he's giving a policy statement, and we've got issues that we have, that need addressing. It's not really about...
So it's not so much getting it accurate, this is what the speech entails,
precisely.
but more of these are the issues that should be handled.
In other countries where you've got people who are sort of seconded, or their correspondents who cover the presidency, itself, they are able, through their contacts and stuff, to get this. And actually some administrations make it policy to give out copies of these statements, to leak it before it is given, so people can actually start analyzing it before. But my point here is that if we set out a stage and say these are the issues for the country, then on the basis of that we have a way of holding it to account. It's not just about what he says, it's about what he should be talking about.
Okay. One of the things that has been changing, or is supposed to change, especially with the promulgation of the new constitution, is even the definition of a shuja. We'll come to the actual presidential speech in a bit and tackle some of the things he said. But this is the definition of a shuja. And as journalists, have we done our part in terms of changing the script? Because traditionally we've always known the shuja to be the freedom fighter, whereas we have athletes, we have young people who are coming up, maybe business people who are now we can look at as shujas for this country. Have we done our part, Clay, do you think, in terms of now changing that definition of a shuja, just not to look at the freedom fighter?
I think sometimes we expect so much from journalists. Okay, maybe it's expected. I mean, because in the whole morass we are probably the best. But I mean, ever since the Act came into being, and also here is a case where we live in a country where it's sometimes very difficult to define, because most of the time we actually worship thieves in this country. And
shouldn't we be changing that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what because that's the narrative, because it's very difficult. I mean, like yesterday, we're seeing some of the athletes who are being talked about, or some actually who we only talk about them when either they're dying or they're dead. You see, that's when we realize that actually this person needs to be there. But all this time, probably there will be somebody, and even the political class will come and start, they will come when these guys are dying or when these guys are dead. So the person, we tend to worship more the politicians than actually the real heroes. I don't know what probably the media can do probably to unearth these guys before. Maybe that's the only way we can change the narrative and start looking for all these people. But then when you do that, who's going to cover the politicians?
Must you cover the politicians?
I mean,
I
get your point. I understand. I mean, we need to strike a balance, but there's so many heroes. There's so many, and I think until we will get that as a society, the definition of a hero, who are our heroes as a society, then the media will not just. I mean, the media cannot just come and start redefining or start changing the narrative and all that. I think as a society, all of us need to come in and decide, like, okay, fine, who do we classify as a hero? Because I see so many people, like some of the people I would classify, I would consider as heroes, actually being kicked left, right, and center by actually people who I don't see anything that they've ever done for this country.
Okay.
You see.
Kadara?
Well, I think in terms of identifying, heroes are around us every day, and there are those who the state will feed, which is probably what happens during the celebrations, and we take our cue, unfortunately, from that. I think as a society we need to be defining it ourselves outside the prism of who it is the government likes, and I think we need to go beyond that. And so I was talking about the TJRC report and these 40,000 witness statements that are there. These are people who experienced history, who did some fairly remarkable things, So if you go into that and you can then tease out the stories of the everyday people, who do some fairly heroic things but are never recognized for it, are never seen, for what they do, what they endure, and the contributions that they make to having us where we are as a country. So I think we need to go beyond simply, if we wanted a definition, we've got one in law. That's in the Heroes Act that was passed, I think, in 2013. It defines, but that is really for the purposes of state. Who they will honor, who they'll give awards to, etc. But we need to go beyond that. So it's not defined by the state. And in fact, we should be at a position where we are asking how come certain people aren't getting this recognition, and putting that pressure on the state so it conforms to what we as a society want. Not the other way, society conforming to the heroes who are sort of pointed out to us by the state.
By the state, all right.
I think,
Dr. Booker?
Yeah, just to add on to what Gadara has said, I think media, has a critical role there by highlighting some of those heroes that might not be the state heroes but are public heroes because of some of the things that they have done. I was looking, I think yesterday on social media, there was something that was trending about this nurse who stayed in the ambulance with
that young man,
with
Madaga.
With Madaga for the hours that he was in the ambulance, and that is somebody worth celebrating.
Yes.
And there are many other people like that. Now when the media then highlights some of these things, it has the power of influencing that public opinion and redefining who the shujas of the day.
And let's not forget that lots of these people who turn out to be heroes in later life at the moment are really not friends of government.
Yes.
In most cases.
Yeah.
And during most of our history, it's really been restricted to Jomo Kenyatta and
but also
every single time.
There was this thing I think Boniface Mwangi did, and I think were quite commendable when he came up with this one of it was Shuja.
The exhibition that he was doing.
Yes, and I think he picked everyday people. You see?
Right, yeah.
And you see, while, you would consider Boniface Mwangi Shuja, just as you said, most of the time is that you're a Shuja on this side, you're not a very good friend of the government, the guys who think that they're close to the government, not necessarily the government. Sometimes the government actually doesn't even have a problem with you, but the stone throwers between the public and the government are the ones who have a problem with you. But you see, what Boniface Mwangi did was actually quite commendable.
Yeah, and I thought that should have gotten much more
coverage.
play, you know, and stuff, and coverage. So when you're looking for other stories to tell, I think the exhibition is still on, if I'm not wrong. It's until November, I think, 18th. You know, so that's somewhere media could actually go and tease out some of these stories.
All right. Let's go to the presidential speech yesterday before we move on to another topic. And just as a refresher, we have some of the statements he made, and that especially was in regards to media. And let's just refresh ourselves with some of what the president had to say yesterday. All right, the clip is coming, I believe. It is in regards to Mashujaa Day that was celebrated yesterday. And for those of you that might be watching from outside the country, Mashujaa is simply heroes. So here's part of that speech.
In the wake of a stern warning from the Hague-based court over prayer rallies for Deputy President William Ruto and radio journalist Joshua Sang, the president was holding back no punches. Uhuru's position was that holding prayers was Kenya's right. The president warned those he termed as meddling in Kenya's affairs that Kenya should be left alone. Uhuru says despite the intrigues on the ICC front, he would continue to pursue the unity and integration of Kenya. He called on friendly nations to help Kenya in its geopolitical affairs. President Uhuru Kenyatta's speech was also directed at those fueling polarization and politics of hate.
Irrespective of our political affiliations, the regions we come from, the faiths we profess, and the communities we come from, work together to consolidate the peace and security of our country. Leaders must avoid reckless and inciting utterances that would undermine peace and cohesiveness. These can cause irreparable damage to Kenya's socio-economic fabric, and they, all leaders, must at all times strive to build a better Kenya.
The president warning that inasmuch as the constitution has broadened freedoms in the country, he was saddened and dismayed by what he called leaders' blatant abuse of the freedoms.
The time has come for us as Kenyans to promote a culture of truthfulness. It is sad sometimes to see how by our own actions we have seriously undermined our own moral compass. It is therefore important to act swiftly to regain the values that we have lost and that are critical for our future.
And the president delved into the issues bedeviling the National Youth Service with the promise to sort the mess out. Nonetheless, Uhuru says despite the misgivings at NYS, the program will be extended to all corners of the nation. Samugina, KTN News.
That was what was happening yesterday in Mashujaa at the Nyayo National Stadium. And just your take, Nancy, Dr. Booker, on, first of all, some of the things that the president had to say in regards to ICC. You know, on one hand, he said that these people who are bringing the issue of ICC to us, who do you think he was referring to? And secondly, he goes ahead and says prayer rallies will continue. It sounds like a contradiction. Who was he talking about when he says these people are bringing issues of ICC?
Well, I wouldn't want to speculate. I also would want to hear from him who the people are who are, you know, bringing up the issue of ICC to us, you know, because he should have pointed it out in his, in his speech. But when he talks about leaders fueling, tribal hatred in the speeches that they give, I think for me, what I wanted to hear, and maybe not at his speech, but going forward, is what happens even prior to his speech, what happens to political leaders who are fueling that kind of hatred. And oftentimes, sometimes I imagine that life would be better without politicians, you know, because we don't see anything, any kind of action being taken against, you know, against them, and they get away with it, and continue polarizing the country. I think for me, the missing link in his speech was going forward. What are we going to do about that? What has been done about some of the things that he has talked about, and then what is going to be, what's going to happen going forward. It was interesting, you know, his take on media, and you know, he said they talk about him all the time. You know, still alive. And he's still alive. And for me, I mean, you know, somebody might look at it and say, well, you know, he took a jab at the media again. But for me, I was happy, because if you're in politics, you know, from a media standpoint, that's a good statement. You know, because when the state is comfortable with media, then something is not right. You know, I think that uncomfortable state is good, you know, for media, because then it means that there are certain things that media is bringing out that would not have been brought to the public domain, you know, if there was a very you know, causal relationship between the two.
All right.
Yeah.
Clay, your feeling on the president's remarks regarding media, and given the fact that the National Assembly had already passed some draconian laws that were seen widely as an attempt to gag the media, out of pressure from the media and the public, they pull that back, then this statement from the president.
No, I think for me, again, as I said it the other time, is what I don't like is the point where they should not even get to a point where they think about it. You see, and now for the president to come in and say like, oh, you know, you people don't do this, I feel that is in fact an insult, because first of all, this idea of the age of where we have to be, the presidency has to direct parliament not to do something. I think we passed that, and we should be guided by reason, in as much as parliament should not have even reached to that level in the first place. And right now, parliament is supposed to be totally independent. What if the parliament actually does not listen to him? Yes, he still has to sign it into law and all that. But this idea that the president has to come to intervene for the media is it's defeatist. I don't think that...
was he really intervening, or was
more
he
or
just
less
expressing his sentiments in regards to that?
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, and this is where I blame the media, we should not get to this level where somebody has to come, like that's the highest authority in the land, you can say that, I mean, as the CEO of the country, where he has to, and I think people are very happy, or even the president spoke up against it and all that. We should actually have structures in place that the media, we don't even have to, the parliament doesn't even have to think about infringing on the media, because if anything, even the presidency itself, the executive, I mean, there's no love lost between the executive and the media. You cannot say like they're friends per se. And these are the same people who have said, who've called newspapers meat wrappers. They're the same people who actually have passed other laws, have signed other whatever's into law, that actually it's not a media per se, but like the security bill and all that, which some of the things that actually end up curtailing the same freedom that you give with the right, I mean, you deny with the left hand, and then you try to say, okay, fine, I'm being nice with the right hand. So for me, that was just normal political statement, and I think it was the same thing that actually they say this today, and then tomorrow they do a different thing, and probably we need a follow-up, and that's when probably the executive actually needs to be open to local media, and so that we can actually sometimes ask him all these questions, you know, like, okay, fine, on this and such a day you did this, and this is what contrary to this is what another section of the executive is actually doing.
Okay.
Yeah, so so for me it's normal political statement, you know. It's not a policy statement per se. I won't read much into it.
You don't feel like it carries any weight?
I don't think so, because based on the things that the executive has done before to the media.
Gadara, do you feel like do you agree with Clay that that statement is just we have an analyst who calls it positioning and posturing.
Well, in a sense, it is a posturing. Personally, I mean, I think it was good that he said it. But it was a bit superfluous, given that the Speaker had already said that these laws need to go back and be relooked at, so they're not contrary to the Constitution. But yeah, I mean, it's good for him to come out, I think, and reaffirm the value of the press. I think it's a bit unfortunate, because when we contextualize it, as Clay has said, you find they do many other things, even in the executive, which is within his own purview. In the laws that they've signed in, as you mentioned, the security bill, which had some draconian clauses on the press as well. It seems that there is a bit of a double standard here. So we need to interrogate that, and put him to task on that as well. I agree. I thought the speech itself was more remarkable for what it didn't tackle than what it did. There was nothing about corruption. There was nothing about the current cash crisis.
Yeah, but that's what I was talking about. Like sometimes it's very difficult to speculate.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But these are things that he should have spoken about, and I would have thought that in a run-up to it, these are the things we should lay out, so people are then aware on what's actually being missed out, and it's not just something that opposition politicians say. And so it becomes politicized in that sense, that as an agenda for the country, the media should be setting out one and saying, these are the issues that you need to be tackling. And this is where then what he avoided and etc. Okay. I think on what he actually spoke about, especially on the ICC issue, I think we really need to ask him about his statement that this was a personal challenge for him and the DP, and why is it that now, when it's raised, it becomes a national issue, a national problem. Then secondly, we've had a big issue just coming out from the teachers' strike about our government and its respect for orders from courts. This is a court that is recognized, the ICC that is recognized in our own law, and they have been warned about talking about what's going on in the court, and he comes out and essentially rubbishes it, so we, I think, have to be very concerned that this is a government that simply doesn't care what courts say, and the rule of law and how they undermine it should be a big issue going forward. Okay,
Dr. Booker, is it too late for us now to take this up and weigh what the president, what matters to the country, and what he said against what is there? Is it too late to do that?
I don't think it's too late for us to do that. I think now that we have it, because as Clay says, they cannot anticipate, which I disagree with him about, but anyway, that's for another day. I think, it's now time for us to interrogate the speech and, put it against the reality on the ground. Even him talking about media freedom. I think it was important that he did that, and I commend him for doing that. But I guess the challenge is the lack of consistency between the rhetoric and the action.
You don't start a fire.
The action.
You start a fire, then you come to fight it, and then you say you want to be praised, like, okay, you see, I am fighting the fire, or I'm looking at
So going forward, I think it would be important then for us, for media houses, to interrogate that speech in light of what is actually happening in society. I think when he talks about the gains in education, for me, the greatest concern was it's important to have more schools. It's important to have more schools connected to electricity, whether or not that is the current position. But when you have children who've been out of school for 5 weeks, because of a teacher's strike.
No, they have electricity in school.
That calls for some attention. I think, as I said, it's now time. Let's see, let's see media houses you know, journalists talking about this in relation to the reality on the ground. And let us get experts, you know, people who understand, for example, education, people who understand security issues, people who understand financial issues, you know, to be able to interrogate that speech and raise some of the questions that need to be raised, and continue, you know, putting government in check and asking those tough questions.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to something else. And Gadara, the El Nino, which we are yet to establish whether it is a hoax or not. It was supposed to have started 2 weeks ago, but away from that, there's been the reporting on it. And remember last this weekend actually that passed, one of the things that was trending is the 37,500 bar of soap. But as per yesterday, there was another report now that came out where they explained that it was actually not 37,500 per bar of soap, but when you work it down, it was coming to about 150 shillings per bar of soap. Have we thrown figures yet again without necessarily interrogating, or it's who's fooling who?
Well, I think there's two issues here. First, I mean, the media, as it reported, I mean, if you read the report itself, that they had an strategy, it does say 1,000 soap, 1,000, doesn't say cartons or anything. So I think it was a valid interpretation of what the document actually said. I think the question is, why did it take so long for clarification to come?
Yeah, because they are still cooking.
You know, this is the thing. Why did it take so long? Why didn't government come out at the very beginning and say, oh no, actually we meant 1,000 cartons?
So on that report that is now where they're discounting, should we have that statement where we're asking, look, why did it take you so long? Rather than just report that this is what they've said, should we be interrogating?
We should be asking, why does it take so long? And this goes back to accountability of government. You know, the second thing that for me stands out is the fact that the media had this report and would it publish it? They would keep quoting it, but whenever you ask, where is it? You know, why isn't it online? Why don't you put it on your website so that people can go and have a look at it themselves and see? You know, I got lost in that. You know, because you've got government saying one thing, it's functionaries, let's say, coming out and were actually saying that the media is cooking up these figures. You know, if you're following them on Twitter and stuff. You know, simply put the document up. This is what it says. You know, and then once we are able to, I think it needs to become practice among media. Whenever you are citing these documents that you say you have, post them, put them up so people can look at them themselves. You know, and going back to what I said at the beginning is, government has to be responsive to the to the concerns that citizens bring up. If they say we have this report that says you're buying soap for 37,000 bob, you know, surely, I mean, it shouldn't take long for somebody who has this to look at it and say, actually, no, we forgot to put the word carton and come out and say it.
That's why sometimes I usually want to have a lot of faith in the state. And the state sometimes, I mean, it's so difficult to have a lot of faith in our state or in our government, because that is something which is very simple. I mean, I've said a lie about, this is a very important thing, there's so much money involved. I mean, it does not take long just to come out and say, like, no, these are the real figures.
You've misinterpreted the document.
Yeah, so it takes like, it's been like almost a week
for them to actually respond.
For them to respond. So you make it very, very difficult for even I as a journalist, or even the common, the person down there, to actually believe you. And I think, leave alone being responsive, that the government needs to be responsive, it needs to be open. Actually, the biggest problem you're facing now is that we're dealing with people, and it's not just this one. I mean, we tend to believe this thing of serikali to be sirikali, you know, it has to be secretive, and that's the problem you're facing. And it's not just now, we faced it in the previous...
And don't forget, when the story first came out, you had the spokesman for Interior Ministry telling the media, well, when they asked him about it, I'm going to get back to you, and never did. You know, it took days, you know.
Get back. All right, Nancy, your take on the reportage of that particular incident, and the fact that now we have a statement from them saying that it was not correct, but what we've done is just taken that statement, but we're not reflecting it on what was reported.
I think for me the most important question is, where are the reins? And I think we should also be yes, it's a whole different department, and media needs to, you know, go and find out how come they're not coming up to tell us you know.
When you ask where the rains, you probably mean in Nairobi.
Yeah, in Nairobi, because most of
it's
raining out, you know, in some parts, but we're not, you know, we're not referring to it as the El Nino rains in those areas. You know, we haven't had you know, places where people have been displaced as a result of the rains, and even if they have, I don't think we.
It's a build-up.
It's a build-up.
Yeah,
the question is that you know, the Met Department needs to come out and clearly tell us, you know, this is what is actually happening, because when you raise a flag and everybody is waiting, and we don't seem to see that kind of, you know, whatever it is that you had predicted, it's important for you to come up and say there's been a change in the weather pattern or whatever it is. And people have budgeted
on the basis of this.
People have budgeted, people have planned their lives around it. There are people who took leave, you know, to be away from office because they didn't want to have to struggle, you know, getting to work. But the most important question for me that I've been struggling with is, if we know that, you know, if the rains strike, then this is likely to happen. Why aren't we working on that before? You know, why is it that we have to put aside monies to manage that disaster? You know, what is it that we are not? What is it that? What are some of the things that we need to do, you know, ahead of time to avert, you know, the disasters that we are anticipating? And that for me is a crisis in itself. That oftentimes we wait for the crisis and then respond to the crisis. We already know that there are areas, you know, that there are buildings that have been, you know, put up on you know, waterways, and that in itself is likely to cause a disaster.
I don't know. Well, I don't know whether it's as a society how we work, because I remember even the day before the day the El Nino was supposed to start, there was all sorts of work going on everywhere, but the day it didn't start, it all stopped. Like suddenly stopped. I think we're waiting for it to start now.
One of the things we need to be asking, and we need to be a bit cynical here, to be honest. When government announces, and the Met is part of a government, you know, they announce that this is coming and we are going to spend X so many billion getting ready for it, and it doesn't look like it's coming, we've got to be asking questions about then what happens to this cash.
To the billions.
You know, where is it a scam? And the other thing is,
need to be cynical, but I think let's the rains in other parts of the country, and most of the people who are complaining about it, you know, not coming are actually Nairobians.
But are they now getting?
Well, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the things that we were told, the predictions of doom are also here.
About the prediction, I know Met sometimes
they make mistakes.
The Met department here. I don't know what, how good the equipment is and stuff like that. But they do make mistakes. For me, my biggest worry is about the budget for this, where after all these things came out, first of all, there have been other stories like, no, the government has not bought that, the government is planning to buy that, and then now it says like, oh, no, it's not that amount of money we are spending, actually it is this. This money bit this is where for me the question lies. Why are we having all this conflicting? Why is all this conflicting information? Why is the government speaking with a forked tongue when it comes to the monies to do with this? I don't have a problem planning for it, you know. But why is the government speaking with the forked tongue and knowing what has been happening with monies in this country or in the past 3-4 years? Anything now is suspect. Anytime money is mentioned,
so we need to interrogate that.
We need to interrogate that.
I want us to wind up, but I don't want to let you go before we just get your take, Gadara, on KTN News celebrating 100 days.
No, the cake was very nice.
That's why I didn't start here, because maybe you'll get it on your way out.
I hope we will. But I mean, to be honest, the first I heard of it was when I came in today, when I heard you speaking about it. You know, but it's good. I think the station itself is evolving, if you will. You know, I think it's still yet to sort of find its real niche. I had really thought that it would be sort of an hour-on-hour rendition of news, a more broader telling of news, more contextualizing of news. You know, some of that is happening, and I'm quite happy about it. You know, but I still find that the fact that we're still waiting for 1 o'clock 7 o'clock,
that
9 o'clock.
That could be down
news.
to you who's watching as opposed to us who's giving the news.
No, actually, even in your bulletins, at 10, at 11.
He's going to start,
it's very much, if you watch at 11 or 12, it's very much, watch this, and then we'll give you a fuller bulletin at 1.
No, he's going to start. He's going to start at
So
8.
this is my thing. Is I think that if we move towards a more consistent, regular retelling, that then we would be really, instead of sort of consigning the news to a half-hour slot and then complaining we can't cover everything, that we can utilize all this other time to say much more, and also to give stories that might not make it to the light, which I've seen actually on KTN News, and I'm quite happy about it. Stories that might not normally come up, and are still important for people to know. You know, are being explained and being featured in the news.
All right, Dr. Booker, 100 days of KTN News, your take?
I think it's commendable work in the first 100 days. You know, once the excitement, I think after 100 days the excitement dies down, and now people start interrogating, you know, the work of the station. And I must commend, you know, the Standard Group for the venture, because it's very expensive to run an all-news station in this part of the world. The kind of resources that you need to be able to do that, you know, is quite enormous. And they have, you know, KTN News has done well. I think at the beginning what we were missing was the regional kind of coverage, but today we see a lot of that. I've even watched a couple of times where, you know, they start off with a story from, you know, Tanzania or Uganda, and as a Kenyan I almost want to say no, you should first be talking about it, and then I have to remember that this is a regional, you know, it's supposed to have a regional look to it. And then you know, my hope is that it continues, and that you know, that the Standard Group invests a lot more, you know, in terms of the journalists that are going to be working there, invest a lot more in investigative reporting, because what we want to see in KTN News is the depth that we miss in all the other you know, media houses, and even on KTN itself, because we you know, you don't have too much space, but on KTN News you have all the space. And so a lot more depth in terms of reporting, a lot more investigative stories. And as Gadara says, some of the stories that are not likely to make it on the main bulletin, they now have a place to go. And so we cannot afford to hear from Standard Group that we don't have the space. You know, they have the time, they have the space.
At least that acknowledges that some of those stories are making it into the good thing. Clay?
Who am I supposed to hear about?
I want to hear your from the case. You could tell us the challenges that we're going through, and
I mean, this is something that, to be honest, I've been telling some of my friends, because the people also within us who maybe are not so enthusiastic about it, but since I watch a lot of TV, I have been telling some of my friends that actually I think they're doing a good job, because the other day I was watching, and you know, we have a reporter in Uganda. I mean, in covering the region, I think they're doing a good job so far, because for a very long time we never used to have so many of these other stories from other countries in the region. Not so much. We like most Nairobians who think Nairobi is the whole country. Kenyans also think that Kenya is the whole world, or Kenya is the whole region, you know. But I think now now that we're getting other stories from I mean, across the border and all that, as probably first item, or maybe I see you do a lot of, I mean, from 8 to 9, the news hour, to 10, the news hour. The news hour, which takes 2 hours.
No, there's 2 news hours. There's a news hour at 8 and there's another one at 10.
Yeah, some of the stories I see actually have that international face.
All right, thank you very much, Clay Muganda, Dr. Buka, and Patrick Gadara, our panelists this morning for Newsroom, and you at home for watching us. We really do appreciate. And unlike Gadara wants to make it, we have a bulletin at 8. You don't have to wait for 1 o'clock. We do have a bulletin coming up at 8 o'clock, so do stay with us right here on KTN News. Otherwise, for Morning Express, this is where we wind it up, and we'll see you at 8 o'clock while we have our bulletin. Thank you.